My fiancée demanded I get a vasectomy before marriage because she might change her mind later. Turns out, she meant with someone else. Hey Reddit, this happened 10 months ago, and I'm finally ready to tell the whole story. My ex-fiancée thought she could manipulate me into getting a vasectomy, so she could secretly get pregnant by her ex-boyfriend while married to me. She had no idea I'd discover her plan, or what I'd do about it. Buckle up, because this one gets nuclear. I, 34 male, work as a senior technician for Duke Energy here in North Carolina. Been there 11 years since I got out of the Army. Started as an apprentice lineman right after my discharge and worked my way up through every level. Journeyman, lead tech, now senior tech, overseeing a crew of 8 guys. I clear about $94,000 a year plus overtime, which can push me over $110,000 in busy years. Own my house free and clear, bought it with my VA loan in 2018 for $195,000, now worth around $285,000, and drive a 2019 Silverado that I paid cash for with my last deployment bonus. My background is solid working-class military. Dad was career Air Force, 30 years as an aircraft mechanic, retired as a senior master sergeant. Mom worked as a dental hygienist at the base clinic while we moved around to different assignments. They taught me the value of hard work, financial discipline, and always having multiple backup plans. Son, Dad would say while we worked on whatever project car he was restoring in our garage, measure twice, cut once, and never let anyone pressure you into making permanent decisions when you're emotional. That advice would prove more valuable than I could have imagined. Growing up military meant moving every few years. Lackland AFB in Texas, McGuire in New Jersey, Ramstein in Germany for 3 years, then Shaw AFB in South Carolina for Dad's final assignment. The constant moves taught me to be adaptable and self-reliant. You learn not to get too attached to places or people because you know you'll be leaving eventually. After high school, I enlisted in the Army as a 12B combat engineer. Did 2 deployments to Afghanistan, one to Kandahar in 2011, another to Helmand Province in 2013. Nothing too crazy, mostly route clearance and IED disposal. But it gave me a different perspective on what really matters in life. When guys are shooting at you, relationship drama seems pretty trivial. The house I bought is a 3-bedroom, 2-bath ranch on 2 acres outside Charlotte, about 30 minutes from the Duke Energy regional office. Paid $195,000 for it in 2018, put about $30,000 into improvements over the years. New HVAC system, updated kitchen with granite countertops, finished the basement into a workshop with proper electrical for my welding equipment. It's my sanctuary, and every dollar I invested made it more valuable and comfortable. The property came with a detached 2-car garage that I converted into my main workshop. Got a full welding setup, machinist tools, engine hoist, air compressor system. Everything needed to rebuild anything mechanical. I restore classic motorcycles as a side business, usually have 2 or 3 bikes in various stages of completion. It's therapeutic work that pays well, and it keeps my hands busy during downtime. I met Jessica, 28 female, about 2 years ago at my buddy Connor's barbecue. Connor works dispatch at Duke Energy. Good guy who throws legendary parties at his place every few months. Jessica was there with her friend Amanda, who was dating one of Connor's neighbors. She worked as a marketing coordinator for Morrison Creative, a boutique agency that handled family-friendly brands, children's clothing companies, toy manufacturers, daycare centers, that kind of thing. Made around $48,000, plus quarterly bonuses based on client retention. Beautiful blonde with an infectious smile, and what seemed like a sharp business mind. About 5 feet 6 inches, fit from regular yoga classes, always dressed professionally, even at casual events. We clicked immediately over craft beer and hiking stories. She seemed impressed that I had my life together. Steady career with good benefits, my own place, clear financial goals, no debt except the house payment I'd already eliminated. The first 8 months were incredible. Jessica seemed genuinely attracted to my stability and maturity compared to the guys she'd dated before. Finally, a real man who has his life figured out, she'd tell her friends. Someone who doesn't live paycheck to paycheck or play video games all day. She'd brag on social media about dating someone responsible and goal-oriented. Her Instagram stories featured photos of us hiking in the Blue Ridge Mountains, working on projects around my house, and planning small trips around North Carolina and Tennessee. Normal couple stuff that made me think I'd found someone who valued the same things I did. Jessica moved into my place after about 8 months, though I kept her name off everything. Deed, utilities, insurance, all of it. Call it military caution. But I'd seen too many soldiers get financially destroyed by women who contributed nothing but expected half of everything when relationships ended. Her moving in was gradual. Started with a toothbrush and spare clothes, then more clothes, then furniture she wanted to add to make it feel like our place. I let her redecorate the guest bedroom and bathroom, but the main living areas and my workshop stayed exactly as they were. She complained sometimes about my masculine decorating choices, but I held firm. Looking back, there were red flags from the beginning that I chose to ignore because I was in love with the woman I thought she was. The biggest warning sign was how obsessed she became with controlling my reproductive choices. It started subtly, comments about how smart it was that we were both careful about birth control, how she wasn't ready for kids yet, but might want them someday when the timing was better. A normal couple conversation that every relationship goes through. But then it escalated into something much more calculated. She'd make pointed comments about men who had accidental babies with ex-girlfriends, calling them trapped and stupid for not taking control of their fertility. She'd send me articles about vasectomies being the responsible choice for modern men, and how evolved couples made these decisions together, instead of leaving reproduction to chance. She started bookmarking articles about male contraception options and leaving them open on her laptop when I'd walk by. Just interesting reading, she'd say when I'd notice. I love how progressive some couples are getting about family planning. Another red flag was her obsession with her ex-boyfriend Trevor. She brought him up constantly, not in a wistful, missing him way, but in this weird comparative manner that made me feel like I was being evaluated against some standard he'd set. Trevor was always so good at planning ahead, she'd say when I'd forget to make dinner reservations. Trevor understood that sometimes you have to make sacrifices for the relationship when I'd balk at her more expensive suggestions for weekend trips. Trevor worked as a regional sales manager for Medtronic, some medical device company based in Charlotte. Drove a leased BMW 3 Series, lived in a trendy downtown loft apartment that probably cost $2,800 a month, and maintained an Instagram presence that screamed, "successful young professional." Jessica would show me his posts featuring expensive dinners at upscale restaurants and weekend trips to Asheville or Charleston, always with comments about how ambitious and sophisticated he was. Not that I'm comparing, she'd always add quickly. I just think it's good when people have drive and vision for their future. The third major red flag was how she'd get defensive and manipulative whenever I questioned anything about her behavior or decisions. When I mentioned that I wasn't comfortable with her having coffee dates with Trevor every few weeks, she'd immediately accuse me of being insecure and controlling. Healthy people can maintain friendships with their exes, she'd lecture me. It shows emotional maturity and good boundaries. I'm not going to let your jealousy dictate who I can be friends with. She'd follow these arguments with social media posts about toxic masculinity and men who try to isolate their partners from their support systems. Never anything direct enough to obviously be about me, but the timing made it clear what she was referencing. When I'd try to discuss our financial arrangements, how much she should contribute to household expenses, whether her name should go on any accounts, she'd shut down the conversation by calling me obsessed with money and unable to see the bigger picture of partnership. Love isn't about keeping score, she'd say, even though I was the one paying the mortgage, utilities, insurance, property taxes, and most of our grocery bills while she contributed maybe $400 a month toward her share of expenses. But I was in love and convinced myself these were just minor compatibility issues we could work through with better communication and time. The proposal happened last Christmas Eve. I'd been saving for months to buy her the perfect ring, a 1.5 carat solitaire from Reed's Jewelers that cost me $8,200 after tax. I'd researched cuts, clarity, color grades, the whole 9 yards. Wanted something that would make her friends jealous and show how serious I was about our future. I proposed during a weekend trip to Asheville, at the same mountain overlook where we'd talked about our future for the first time. Craggy Pinnacle, about an hour drive from the city, perfect view of the Blue Ridge Mountains stretching to the horizon. I'd planned everything carefully. Hiking boots for the trail, champagne chilled in a cooler, photographer hidden nearby to capture the moment. She said yes, cried happy tears, and immediately started live streaming the proposal on Instagram before I could even stand up from one knee. "OMG, you guys! Mark just proposed, and I'm literally shaking," she screamed into her phone while I was still holding the ring box. This is what real love looks like when both people do the work to grow together. The live stream got over 4,000 viewers and hundreds of comments within minutes. She spent our entire celebration dinner at the Grove Park Inn responding to messages and planning how to document our engagement journey instead of talking to me about wedding plans or our future together. Wedding planning began in earnest after New Year's, and that's when Jessica's true agenda started revealing itself. "I've been thinking about something really important for our future," she said over dinner one night in mid-February, using that serious tone that always meant she'd been planning this conversation for weeks. What's that, babe? I want you to get a vasectomy before the wedding. I nearly choked on my steak. What? Why would you want that? It's practical and modern. I don't want kids right now. Maybe not for years. And this way, we don't have to worry about accidents or me dealing with birth control side effects forever. She had her phone out, showing me articles she'd bookmarked over the past few weeks. Look, it's becoming really popular among progressive couples who want to take complete control of their reproductive choices. Jessica, that's permanent surgery. What if we change our minds later and want children? That's the beautiful part. She seemed genuinely excited that I'd asked. If we decide we want kids later, we can use a sperm donor and do IVF. It's much more controlled and intentional that way. We'd be choosing exactly when and how to have children instead of leaving it to biological chance. Something about that phrasing felt fundamentally wrong to me. Why would we use a sperm donor? If we want kids, why not just reverse the vasectomy? Reversals aren't always successful, and IVF has much better success rates anyway. Plus, using a donor means we can choose someone with great genetics, smart, athletic, healthy family history. It's like upgrading our children's potential instead of just accepting whatever random genetic combination we might produce. The way she said upgrading made my skin crawl. You want to use another man's sperm to have our children? It's not about the sperm. It's about the pregnancy and raising the child together. The genetic material is just biology. The love and parenting is what actually makes a family. She reached across the table to hold my hand. This is about us being intentional and smart about our future, instead of just hoping for the best. I told her I needed time to think about such a major decision. That was apparently the wrong answer. Time to think about what? It's a simple outpatient procedure that takes 30 minutes. You'd be back to work in 2 days. Her voice had an edge to it now. I'm not asking you to sacrifice anything major. Just make a smart choice that benefits both of us. Over the next few weeks, Jessica launched a full-scale pressure campaign to convince me to get the vasectomy. She printed out articles about enlightened masculinity and men who prioritize their partner's comfort over their ego. She made appointments with her gynecologist to discuss family planning options and came home with pamphlets about vasectomy procedures and recovery times. She scheduled a consultation with Dr. Patterson, a urologist in Charlotte, without telling me first. I just wanted to get information, she explained when I found the appointment confirmation in her email. He can answer all your questions and put your mind at ease about the procedure. When I continued to hesitate and ask questions, she started getting nasty about it. You're being selfish and egotistical, she'd say during arguments. This is about what's best for both of us and our future, but you're too focused on your masculine pride to see it clearly. To her friends and our mutual acquaintances, she framed my hesitation as me thinking with my dick instead of being practical about family planning. She'd post Instagram stories about modern relationships requiring sacrifice from both partners, with clear implications about what kind of sacrifice she was talking about. Some men understand that love means putting your partner's needs first, she'd say, usually while showing me something Trevor had posted about his latest business success or weekend trip. The pressure intensified as our wedding date approached. Jessica had scheduled the ceremony for May 20th at Chatfield Country Club, a venue that cost us $9,800 for the day. She wanted the vasectomy completed by March, so I'd be fully healed and ready for our honeymoon by wedding time. When I said I still wasn't ready to make such a permanent decision, she had a complete meltdown in our kitchen one Tuesday night. You don't love me, she sobbed, throwing dish towels around like a child having a tantrum. If you loved me, you'd want to do this for us. You're just being stubborn and selfish because you can't handle me having input on our reproductive choices. She locked herself in the bedroom for 3 hours, then emerged to post a long Instagram story about partners who make unilateral decisions about the relationship and recognizing when someone isn't ready for marriage-level commitment. The message was crystal clear. Either I got the vasectomy, or she'd consider ending the engagement. I felt trapped between losing the woman I loved and making a permanent medical decision that felt fundamentally wrong. The wedding was 2 months away. We'd already put down $12,000 in deposits, sent out 120 invitations, booked vendors, reserved hotel blocks for out-of-town guests. My parents had already taken vacation time and booked their flights from South Carolina. How could I throw away 2 years and thousands of dollars over what Jessica kept insisting was a simple medical procedure that shows you trust me? But my dad's voice kept echoing in my head. Never let anyone pressure you into making permanent decisions when you're emotional. That's when my gut started screaming that something was seriously wrong with this whole situation. Jessica's behavior became increasingly suspicious as the wedding approached, and my resistance to the vasectomy continued. She'd go out for girls' nights with Amanda or her work friends, and come back later than expected with elaborate explanations about where they'd been. She started password protecting her phone and getting defensive when I'd glance at the screen while she was texting. Her marketing meetings became more frequent and lasted longer. Dinner with the client from Little Sprouts Daycare, she'd say, coming home at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday. We were going over their entire social media strategy for next quarter. But when I'd ask specific questions about these clients or projects, her answers were vague and inconsistent. She'd claim to be working on a campaign for a toy company one week, then mention a completely different client the next time I asked about it. The breaking point came on a Thursday night in early April. Jessica had gone out for what was supposed to be a 2-hour dinner with her college friend Amanda to discuss bridesmaid dress alterations. She came home at 11:45 p.m. claiming they'd lost track of time catching up and planning bachelorette party details. But her story didn't add up. She said they'd gone to Romano's downtown, but her GPS history on our shared Google account showed she'd been on the other side of town near the South End neighborhood, specifically near Trevor's apartment complex on East Boulevard. When I mentioned that Romano's seemed like an odd choice for a casual dinner, she got immediately defensive. We ended up changing plans and going somewhere else. Why are you interrogating me about every detail? That night, while Jessica was in the shower washing off what smelled distinctly like men's cologne, her phone lit up on the nightstand with a text notification. Normally, I'd never look at her phone. I respect privacy and trust, but the preview message made my blood freeze. So when do we start trying? I can't wait to see you pregnant. The sender was listed as T. Hart in her contacts. My hands were literally shaking as I picked up her phone. The notification was from Trevor. I scrolled up through their conversation, and what I found made me physically nauseous. Weeks of messages about their ongoing affair. Jessica telling him she'd make me get snipped so he could be the real father when they decided to have kids. Detailed discussions about timing her pregnancy to coincide with our marriage, so I'd assume the child was mine and support it financially while never knowing the truth. The most damning exchange was from the previous week. Jessica, Mark's still being stubborn about the vasectomy, but I'll wear him down. Once he's sterile, we're good to go. He'll make a great provider while you give me the babies I actually want. Trevor, you're evil and I love it. Can't wait to watch him change diapers for my kids. Jessica, he's so clueless it's almost sad. Keeps talking about our future children when he'll never father anything. You're going to be the real daddy. There were photos too. Intimate pictures of them together that she'd sent him. Screenshots of our private text conversations, where she mocked my concerns about the vasectomy. Even voice messages where she laughed about how pathetic it was that I trusted her completely. The most sickening message was a voice memo from 3 days earlier. He actually asked me again why we couldn't just reverse the vasectomy later, if we wanted kids. I told him reversals aren't reliable, but really I just want him permanently sterile, so there's no chance of accidents. This way I know 100% that any babies will be yours, and he'll never suspect anything because he'll think he can't have children. The betrayal was complete, calculated, and sociopathic. She wasn't just cheating. She was planning to trick me into raising another man's children while believing I was infertile. She was going to let me go through life thinking I had some kind of medical problem, when she deliberately had me sterilized for another man's convenience. I screenshot everything and forwarded it to my personal email before she got out of the shower. My hands were trembling with rage, disbelief, and a sick kind of clarity about who I'd actually been planning to marry. When Jessica came back to the bedroom in her towel, I was sitting on the edge of the bed pretending to watch the late news. She kissed my forehead and got under the covers like nothing had happened. "How was dinner with Amanda?" I asked casually. "Great. We ended up talking for hours about wedding logistics and life stuff. You know how it is when you haven't seen someone in a while. Time just flies." Every single word was a lie delivered with perfect sincerity. I lay awake most of that night, staring at the ceiling and trying to process the full scope of what I'd discovered. The next morning, after Jessica left for work at Morrison Creative, I called in sick to Duke Energy and spent the day documenting everything and planning my response. I forwarded all the screenshots to a secure email account and printed physical copies of the most damning conversations. Then, I hired a private investigator. Bill Morrison, no relation to Jessica's company, was a retired Charlotte Mecklenburg police detective who now ran his own investigation service. His office was in a strip mall off Independence Boulevard. Nothing fancy, but his credentials were impressive. 28 years on the force, specialized in fraud and adultery cases. Son, in 3 decades of investigating cheating spouses, I've seen some cold-blooded manipulation, but this vasectomy scheme is next-level calculated. Bill said, after I showed him the text screenshots. Good thing you found out before the wedding. How do you want to handle this? I want irrefutable proof of everything. Photos, video, more text evidence, financial records, whatever it takes to document the full scope of what they've been doing. Bill got to work immediately. Within a week, he had surveillance photos of Jessica and Trevor entering his apartment together multiple times, credit card records showing she'd been paying for their hotel visits with money from our joint account, and even more text conversations he'd recovered through digital forensics on her backup accounts. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Photos of them kissing in restaurant parking lots, entering hotel rooms together, shopping for what looked like a couple's weekend getaway. Financial records showing Jessica had spent over $2,800 of our wedding fund on romantic dinners and hotel stays with Trevor. But I didn't confront Jessica yet. Instead, I started planning something much more strategic and devastating. First, I reached out to Trevor's girlfriend. Yes, Trevor had a live-in girlfriend, a nurse named Katie who worked at Atrium Health Carolina's medical center. I found her through social media detective work and sent her a carefully worded message. Hi, Katie. This is Mark, Jessica's fiancé. I think we need to talk about Trevor and Jessica. Could you call me when you get a chance? I have information I think you should see. She called within 2 hours. Mark, I've been going absolutely crazy wondering if I was imagining things. Trevor's been acting so strange for months. Secretive phone calls, staying out late with elaborate explanations, claiming he has to work weekends when I know Medtronic doesn't have weekend requirements. I sent her some of the less explicit screenshots as proof. The silence on the other end of the line lasted almost a full minute. That bastard, she finally whispered. That absolute piece of shit. I've been paying half his rent for 8 months while he's been cheating on me and planning to get another woman pregnant. We agreed to meet in person the next day at a coffee shop in South End. Katie turned out to be a smart, no-nonsense woman in her early 30s who was just as betrayed and furious as I was. She brought her own evidence. Suspicious charges on Trevor's credit cards, location data from his phone showing him places he'd lied about being, and photos she'd found hidden in his laptop. Mark, I want them to pay for this, Katie said, tears of anger forming in her eyes. Not just breaking up quietly and letting them move on with their lives, I want them to face real consequences for what they've done to us. That's when the plan really started taking shape. I decided to play along with Jessica's scheme while secretly preparing the most devastating public exposure possible. I told her I'd finally decided to go through with the vasectomy, and she was absolutely thrilled. Oh my God, baby, I'm so proud of you, she said, practically bouncing with excitement. I knew you'd come around once you really thought about it rationally. This is going to make our marriage so much stronger and more intentional. She immediately started bragging to her friends about how she'd won, and I'd finally stepped up and made the mature choice for our relationship. Her Instagram stories were full of vague references to partners who listen and grow, and love winning over ego. But instead of booking a doctor's appointment, I booked a consultation with a family law attorney. I also started planning what would become the most epic wedding disaster in Charlotte's social media history. The wedding was scheduled for May 20th at Chatfield Country Club, a venue that cost us $9,800 for the day, including tables, chairs, and basic lighting. Jessica had spent months planning every detail to be Instagram perfect. The flowers alone cost $3,800. She'd hired a professional photographer, $2,200, and videographer, $1,800, specifically to capture content for her social media channels and the wedding planning business she wanted to start after we were married. All that effort and expense was about to backfire in the most spectacular way possible. I told Jessica I wanted to make the wedding reception extra special with a unique slideshow presentation. Photos of us growing up, our relationship milestones, family memories, funny stories from friends, the whole 9 yards. She absolutely loved the idea and gave me complete creative control over the project. That's so sweet, baby. I can't wait to see what you put together. Make sure to include some of my best Instagram photos. I want everyone to see how amazing our love story has been. Maybe add some of those cute videos from our hiking trips too. What Jessica didn't know was that the slideshow would tell a very different story than the romantic narrative she was expecting. I spent 3 weeks creating a masterpiece of public humiliation. The first half would be exactly what she expected. Sweet photos of our relationship, family pictures, cute couple moments that would lull the audience into thinking they were watching a normal wedding slideshow. But the second half would be pure, documented evidence. Screenshots of her texts with Trevor, photos the private investigator had taken of them together, even audio recordings of her voice messages talking about their pregnancy scheme and how clueless I was about their plan. I also coordinated with Katie, who would attend the wedding as my surprise guest. Trevor didn't know she'd discovered their affair, so his presence in my wedding party would create the perfect storm when the truth came out. The final technical piece was crucial. My groomsman Derek works in IT for a local bank and helped me set up a remote backup system for the slideshow. If anyone tried to stop the presentation or unplug the projector, the content would automatically continue streaming to a backup website that every phone in the venue could access through the Wi-Fi network. We tested it multiple times to make sure it was foolproof. The week before the wedding, Jessica's behavior reached peak levels of excitement and deception. She spent every evening finalizing last-minute details with her bridesmaids, coming home after 10 p.m. and claiming they'd been coordinating vendor schedules or doing final venue walkthroughs. She posted a TikTok about couples who trust each other enough to have opposite-sex best friends that got over 180,000 views and sparked huge debates in the comments. Half the people were calling her progressive and mature, while the other half were calling the situation weird and inappropriate. My favorite comment was from my sister Amy. "Girl, if you need this much social media validation for your choices, maybe reconsider the choices." Jessica blocked Amy immediately and then posted another TikTok about toxic family members who can't handle growth and progress. 3 days before the wedding, Jessica came home from her final dress, fitting absolutely glowing with excitement. "Everything's going to be perfect," she said, showing me photos on her phone. "I can't wait for everyone to see how beautiful our wedding is going to be. It's going to be the most memorable day of our lives." "It's definitely going to be memorable," I replied, which she took as romantic excitement rather than the ominous promise it actually was. The wedding day arrived with perfect late spring weather, 75 degrees, sunny, light breeze. Jessica looked absolutely stunning in her $5,200 designer dress from Kleinfeld. Yes, she'd insisted on shopping there during a trip to New York. She was radiant with the glow of someone who thought she'd successfully manipulated her way to the perfect life while keeping her affair completely secret. Trevor stood among my groomsmen in his rental tuxedo, looking smugly satisfied and checking his phone constantly, probably texting with Jessica about their post-wedding plans. The ceremony itself went smoothly at the outdoor pavilion overlooking the golf course. Jessica had written her own vows, naturally, full of flowery language about growing together through challenges, making sacrifices for love, and building a family based on trust, honesty, and commitment. The irony was so thick, you could cut it with a chainsaw. She looked directly at Trevor during several lines that were clearly meant for him rather than me. "I promise to choose you every day, to be honest about my needs and desires, and to create the family we've always dreamed of together." My vows were simple and traditional, expressions of love for the woman I thought I was marrying, not the sociopathic fraud standing in front of me in white. After the ceremony, we moved to the main reception hall for cocktails and dinner. The slideshow was scheduled to play during dessert, when everyone would be seated, relaxed, and focused on the screen. Katie arrived just as dinner was being served, wearing a stunning red dress that complemented our wedding colors perfectly. I'd told Jessica that Derek was bringing a date he'd recently started seeing, a nurse from the hospital system. Jessica was too wrapped up in being the center of attention to pay much notice to one more guest. As the dessert course was served and the lights dimmed for the slideshow, I stood up to address our 125 guests, family, friends, co-workers, college buddies, people who'd traveled from multiple states to celebrate with us. Thank you all for being here to celebrate this incredibly special day with Jessica and me. Before we continue the party, I wanted to share a presentation that really captures our journey together, the complete truth about who we are as a couple and what our future holds. The projector screen lit up with our opening slide, Mark and Jessica, a love story. The first 8 minutes were exactly what everyone expected. Photos of us hiking together, cooking dinner at my house, celebrating holidays with both families, vacations to Myrtle Beach and the Smoky Mountains. Our guests smiled and applauded at particularly cute moments, settling in for what they thought would be a typical wedding slideshow. Then came the transition slide, but every love story has hidden chapters. The next image was a screenshot of Jessica's text to Trevor. "Mark's still being stubborn about the vasectomy, but I'll wear him down. Once he's sterile, we're good to go." Gasps started immediately across the reception hall. Jessica's face went from bridal glow to absolute white in half a second as she realized what was happening. The next slide showed a photo of Jessica and Trevor kissing passionately in the parking lot of his apartment complex, taken by the private investigator with a telephoto lens. "Mark, stop this right now!" Jessica screamed, jumping up from her chair and nearly knocking over the centerpiece. "Turn it off!" But the presentation continued automatically. More text screenshots, more surveillance photos, And then the audio clip of Jessica's voice message to Trevor. He'll make a great provider while you give me the babies I actually want. I can't wait to see his face when he realizes he's been raising your children and thinking he's infertile. The reception hall erupted in complete chaos. Jessica's parents stood up in shock and horror. My parents looked stunned, but were already moving toward me supportively. Trevor tried to bolt for the exit, but found Katie blocking his path to the door. Going somewhere, Trevor? Katie asked loudly enough for half the room to hear. Don't you want to hear about your secret pregnancy plans with the bride? She threw her full glass of wine directly in his face, then turned to address the room. For everyone wondering, I'm Trevor's live-in girlfriend of 3 years. Was his girlfriend, I should say, until I found out about this. Jessica was in complete meltdown mode, mascara streaming down her face in black rivers. This is completely insane. Mark, you're psychotic. Those messages are fake. You edited them. I pulled out my phone and played another audio recording. This one of Jessica describing in detail how she planned to time her ovulation cycle to get pregnant immediately after our honeymoon, then convinced me the baby was somehow mine despite the vasectomy. That's when Trevor's own mother, a dignified woman in her 60s who'd flown in from Virginia, walked over and slapped him across the face in front of everyone. How dare you disgrace our family like this, you disgusting pig? Jessica's father, a retired bank manager named Robert, approached the head table with his face red from embarrassment and rage. Jessica Marie, what in God's name have you done to this family? But Jessica wasn't done making a spectacle of herself. She grabbed the microphone from the DJ booth and tried to take control of the narrative. Everyone needs to know that Mark is abusive and controlling. He's been trying to force me into having children when I'm not ready. This is all revenge, because I wouldn't give him what he wanted. That's when Katie stepped forward with her own microphone that Derek had quickly provided. Actually, let's talk about what Jessica and Trevor were really planning, she said, pulling out her phone. I have recordings too. She played a voice message from Trevor, describing how they were going to play the long game and let me support their children while they continued their affair on the side, maybe for years, until they could figure out how to transition to being together openly. The room was in absolute chaos. Half the guests were filming everything on their phones, the photographer was capturing every moment of the disaster, and my videographer was getting it all in 4K resolution. The other half were streaming toward the exits, but not before taking plenty of photos that would live forever on social media. I made one final announcement. For anyone still here, the bar remains open and fully paid for. The catering is taken care of. Feel free to stay and enjoy yourselves while we sort out this mess. Consider it a celebration of dodging the biggest bullet of my life. About 40 people stayed, mostly my family, closest friends, and a few relatives who wanted front row seats to the continued drama. The other 85 guests left immediately, but not before documenting everything for their own social media accounts. Jessica cornered me near the gift table as the venue staff started the cleanup process. Mark, please, we can work through this. I made mistakes, but I love you. We can go to counseling. You love my house, my income, and your plan to trick me into raising another man's children. I corrected her, showing her another screenshot. Trevor's your baby daddy. I'm just the paycheck and the patsy. It's not like that. I was confused. Trevor manipulated me into thinking things that weren't true. Jessica, I have 4 months of evidence showing you planned this entire scheme down to the smallest detail. You initiated most of these conversations. You scheduled your affair around your ovulation cycle. You literally called me a clueless provider and laughed about how pathetic it was that I trusted you completely. She broke down completely, collapsing into one of the reception chairs in her $5,200 dress. What happens now? Now you get to explain to everyone why you tried to manipulate me into permanent sterilization so you could secretly get pregnant by your ex-boyfriend. You get to deal with the fact that every video of this disaster is already going viral on social media. And you get to figure out how to rebuild your life without my house, my income, or my support. I walked away, leaving her sobbing while her parents tried to process the full scope of what their daughter had done.